Hello, welcome to Questions of Life. This is the next video in our series looking at why does God allow suffering. So this life and all of its struggles are temporary and are nothing compared to what heaven has in store for us. In a moment I'm going to ask you about heaven, but I've got a question from Tracy just to throw in here, talking about now and what God is doing in the midst of suffering. And where is her question? Here you go. Do you think that God has allowed this virus to spread as it has so that people can reevaluate their lives with their families and not the material things in life?
I think half and half. I think Christians will take different points of view, and some Christians will go wholeheartedly yes. Some will even go further. Some might even say God sent it to do that. My own view is not that. My own view is that God is the great fixer. He's the great restorer. He's the great redeemer.
Yep.
He's the God that glues things back together. He isn't the God that breaks them, but he's brilliant at fixing things.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that TV program, The Repair Shop, where people take, I only watch it, it's the daytime TV, but my family love it, and my brother-in-law's been on it, where you have something and you take it in and they repair it. And I see God like the great repair shop. He fixes things. And the suffering of COVID, the suffering of this pandemic, God brings some good out of it for lots of people. And one of those things is he does cause people to reevaluate. And I think being confronted with death always causes people to reevaluate, because it makes us realize that there are some things that are more important than the things we were running after before. So I think that God always does that in any suffering, that one of the things he does is help people to refocus and reshape their lives. That's not why he intends it, but it's certainly what God is doing. And I think that when we begin to realize that we are frail and we're not in control of our lives and we can't plan happiness here on earth. There's a bit in James, a New Testament book of the Bible, where the writer James says, why do you keep saying you're going to do this and that tomorrow? You don't have control. And the pandemic's shown us that. We don't have control. And actually what we need to do is ask for God's help each day rather than plan everything without him. So I think there is that sense. I think it's a good question from Tracy, because there is that sense that God, he is doing that. I don't think that is the intention, but it's the byproduct. Yep.
I think it's always fantastic to see that, isn't that? That in the midst of whatever's going on in life, God is able to bring some good out of it. That if we look to him, we put our trust in him, if we invite him. That's been my experience and many of our experiences, that life may have been difficult at times, but nothing's ever wasted with God. That actually you look back and you see, okay, I see how that shaped me, how God's used that maybe to help other people. And that really excites me, to think all that I've been through in my life isn't wasted. It isn't just this pile of mess that God's had to help me with, but actually now he can use that to help others. I love that. That really encourages me.
Yeah.
Right, I've got another text message.
Great.
And this is from Steve. And just to say, if you want to text in, you can do. The number is 0754 489 9698, or you can email us at qol@secbc.org.uk. Now, it is Steve's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Steve.
So we want to say happy birthday to Steve.
What a way to celebrate.
I know. Us, Questions of Life. Steve, you are living your best life. I can see that. Steve is a day younger than me to the year. Yes. There you have it. Who'd have thought? I mean, obviously, I'm more mature than you, Steve. Right, so here's Steve's question. He says, why do some countries suffer so badly with earthquakes, flooding, tsunamis, and famine, and yet other countries suffer in silence without as many problems? It's like us as a human race, isn't it? Some people have lots of suffering. Some people don't. What's going on?
I think the world is unfair. Some communities are more prone to drought, some communities are more prone to floods, some communities are more prone to earthquakes. What is interesting is that some of the richest countries are also countries that are prone to drought and prone to earthquakes. Because actually it isn't the heat or the earthquake that alone causes the suffering. It's the economic system that's there. So, for example, I was just reading about about some of the mega cities in the Middle East that are some of the wealthiest places in the world, and yet those places are constant droughts. Whereas in other parts of Africa, people are dying because of the droughts. And I think it's simply because we don't share from one part of the world to another. So it isn't simply the climate that causes people to suffer, because otherwise the Middle East would be a place of suffering. But it isn't, because economically they have the wealth of their natural resources. And one could argue that perhaps they could do more to share that with the communities that don't have that. Same with the earthquakes. We know that parts of America, parts of Japan are equally as volatile earthquake-wise as, say, Haiti or other places where there's been huge loss of life. But when an earthquake hits Japan or New Zealand, say, or America, because there's greater wealth, the houses are built more sensibly, or not in dangerous places, or not with bad architecture, and so there's minimal loss of life. So at the end of the day, our global climate, I don't think really takes life. It's the way we treat each other, and where we allow some people to be in poorer conditions than others, and the way we build houses, where we build houses, the way we share food, the way we use resources, that's what causes the loss of life when there's a natural disaster. Same with flooding, same with all of these things. It's the poor that are damaged, not the wealthy.
I often wonder if we did a survey in the Western world and we said, would you be prepared to have less money and slightly less quality of living so that everybody else around the world had theirs raised? I'd be really interested to see, because I think we're really good at paying lip service to it. We're really good at saying, oh, those poor people, I'll give my tenner to Live Aid or to whatever it is. But are we, at the end of the day, actually prepared to say, okay, this is a huge issue. What can we do to make a difference? And I wonder what the response would be. Interests me. Now, there's a theologian called Belinda Carlisle, and she said heaven is a place on earth. Now, you love this whole area of heaven. Talk to us about heaven. Tell us some stuff about it, because you're saying that life is really difficult. And if this life was all there is, then, God, we've got some complaints because it's tough. But you're saying that there's a hope, that there's something that we're holding on to, that there's something far greater that is coming, that is going to be awesome. Tell us about heaven.
So, lots to say. I think firstly to say that I'm convinced about heaven. I think nature points to heaven, whether it's the caterpillar that goes into a chrysalis before it becomes a butterfly, whether it's the bulb that goes in the ground before it comes out as a daffodil later in the year, whether it's the nut that falls off the tree, the conker that falls off the tree. And nature points to this rebirth all the time. Secondly, I think the resurrection of Jesus, which we've talked about as this historical anomaly, what was going on there, to me points to there being life after death. Thirdly, I think that it's common to all the religions. It's an innate natural belief that there is an afterlife. So all of those things point to me to it being a real thing. Then if you look at the New Testament and try and understand what it's talking about, I think there are some important misconceptions to get rid of. It's very clear to me that when you read the New Testament, when you read something like a book of the Bible called 1 Corinthians 15, you will see that heaven is solid. It's real. It's not airy-fairy.
We're not floating around.
It's not floaty. It uses a lot of analogies. But I think the best thing to imagine is the God who created colour and physicality and life now is bound to recreate that in heaven. So the God who invented the sunset and the mountains and the oceans and the joy of running and the joy of dancing and the joy of art and the joy of music and the joy of company and the joy of relationships and the joy of laughter, that's bound to be all in heaven, because that's what his nature is. So heaven is where all of those good things that God has created are given freedom to operate in the right balance without self-centeredness dominating. So I think that we'll know each other in heaven. I think that we'll be able to talk about life on this earth and remember that we'll have a new body that doesn't decay.
What, do we get to choose that new body? Like I could say, like a size 8, and you know.
I doubt it somehow.
It's a shame.
I think it'll be God's special gift for you. I think he's the ultimate shopper. I think he'll choose your outfit for you.
But you'll recognise me. There'll still be some semblance of understanding.
Yes,
that's Kath.
yeah. I think it's like if you go to a reunion. I'm old enough now to look very different to what I did as a teenager. But you can, when you meet somebody who you knew 30, 40 years ago, you can sense. There's a sense that's the person.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be that element of reunion. I think that we'll know each other. It talks explicitly about that. It says we don't grieve like those who have no hope. We do have a hope. We will see people again.
Will we be married in heaven?
Well, the good news is that every relationship will be like marriage, in the sense of there won't be this need for exclusivity. There won't be this insecurity, I must have somebody who loves me specially. We will all feel value. So there won't be marriage. It'll be more like one huge family.
So there won't be sex in heaven?
No, because again, we don't need that sense of exclusivity. We don't need to procreate. And I think that there will be as much physical pleasure that we won't miss or need sex.
Great.
I might be wrong. It may be sex, but I don't think so. I can't quote a verse that says one way or the other, but I doubt it because I don't think it's something that is really crucial to happiness.
So you touched on
I have an whole session going on there that we're going to come back to another night, perhaps.
You touched on heaven having no tears, and one of the amazing things about it being a place of harmony, of peace. What will we spend our time doing? Because eternity, you know, you're 10, you're 15, you're 20,000 years on and on and on. I remember when I was a child and my parents told me about that. It used to scare me because I couldn't get my head around the figures. Yeah. It used to scare me that Jesus was coming back as well, and every night I'd be worried that he was coming back. Yeah. What are we going to do for all that time?
Well, I don't know exactly. I was always worried because I was told that we were going to worship for 1,000 years, and I've never really enjoyed that much.
Well, I've heard you sing, so that's not going to be heaven for me.
But actually, that's because we misunderstand the word worship. Yeah. The word worship isn't about singing. The word worship is about loving God, and we will love God for 1,000 years. I think we'll have life in all its fullness. So I don't know whether that means that we'll have jobs, whether we'll be carpenters and creative roles in some sense, or whether it's just like every day will be like a day off where we can walk and talk with each other and value. I just am convinced it will be good. Yeah. And even though I think, some people say to me, oh, it will be boring to live forever. And I think that we haven't grasped the joy of life if we think that. And it is those glorious days, whether it's a summer day or whatever the glorious day is for you, that day in the middle of your holiday, and you think, if only every day could be like this. That's how I imagine heaven to be. That it will be like that. And maybe I'll have tasks, and maybe I'll have roles, and maybe we'll look after the land, and we'll look after animals, and it'll be natural and good and enjoyable and rewarding and fulfilling, quite possibly. I don't think the Bible's clear on that. I just think it's clear that it is eternal joy, it's eternal life, and it puts the pain of this world in perspective.
And God will be with us. Yeah. So at the moment, there's, God is kind of with us. We can talk to him, but physically he's not here present. But in heaven, God will be with us. That's quite an awesome thought, isn't it? You know, do you think we'll get to sit with him and say, God, talk me through my life? Well, do you think we get to ask questions? That would just blow my mind, thinking, God's with me. Yeah,
and I do think that. I think that that's very much part of the entry process. So my imagination and my piecing together of bits of Scripture is that as we enter heaven, so that there is this caricature of the gates and the Peter, but I think there is some sense of entry. And that for those who have recognized their faults, all the stuff that we've done wrong is gone. It's on, Jesus has taken it. So there's no sense of God saying, what were you doing that for? What were you doing that for? But what I do think what's left is the good.
Yeah.
So I think that when we enter heaven, he will say, let me just want to go through, and I want you to show you the fruit of what you did. I want to show you the consequences of the prayers you offered, of the money you gave, of the friendship you brought, of the sacrifices you made, of the integrity that you lived by, of the risks you made on my behalf, of the people you told about me. I'm going to show you the fruit. I'm going to show you these people. I'm going to show you where that went. I'm going to show you what it did. And I believe that God says, well done. And he talks about a reward in heaven. And again, Christians kind of debate what that reward might be. My understanding is that reward is in that conversation. And so if I've, come to Jesus late in life, or come to Jesus but not really served him, and I've admitted that I need him, and yes, he's taken me into heaven, but a lot of my life was self-centered, then I imagine my entry meeting with God is 5 minutes. And he says, Donald, it's great to have you. Come in.
Yeah.
Whereas if I've given my life in service to God, then my entry meeting might be a couple of hours or more, and the reward is hearing him say, well done. There's no punishment, there's no rebuke, but the reward is hearing him say, well done. And I think then, in that conversation, in that dialogue, or maybe later we can say, God, what was going on with that?
Yeah.
Why did that happen?
Yeah.
And he may say, because people made choices. And he may say, I don't know why it happened, but I'll show you what we've done since and what's happened. Or maybe he will be able to say why that happened. So I do think there'll be the opportunity to ask God and to make sense of this mystery.
That's awesome.